Alright, YouTube, so we're back, of course, to talk about some Final Fantasy VII Remake, and we got a couple of things to talk about today, and more specifically, we're talking about the development of Remake Part 2, and possibly how far it's going to go in terms of location. So we're just going to hop right into it, but first off, I want to look at this small thing I'd seen on Reddit. Somebody had screenshot Brandon White's story on, Instagram or Snapchat or something, I don't know exactly what it is. Of course, Brandon White is the voice actress for Aerith, and they'd said that, she was teasing FF7 news somehow. Beyond the picture she posted, she put, "What's she working on, I wonder?" She also has a green eye, much like Aerith, and in the bottom right corner, very small, it says #sneak-peek. But as people pointed out on the Reddit post, she's actually working on a cosplay. More than likely, I'm guessing it's a cosplay for Aerith, since she's the voice actress for Aerith, and the green eye, Aerith has green eyes. The whole point of me wanting to talk about this is, the community needs to just calm down a little bit. I don't understand how somebody could see that image and hop right to the conclusion that she's teasing news for the remake. She is simply the voice actor for the role of Aerith Gainsborough. She doesn't do mocap for Aerith. Aerith isn't modeled after her in terms of, visually. She just does the voice. So why would she color her eye green, editing it, or put in a green contact? And why would she be teasing news for the game at all? She'd probably get in trouble for doing that. Any official news in regards to, Remake Part 1, some sort of update, DLC, potentially, we still don't know if that's even going to happen. Or any news regarding Remake Part 2 is either going to be a surprise when it gets revealed, or they'll kind of talk about it or tease it officially through social media, like the Remake Twitter account, where if they're going to do some sort of Square Enix presentation online, on YouTube, live stream, something like that, they might be hey, we're also going to talk about the remake here at this event, to kind of hype up the event. And as we talked about a couple weeks ago in one of our remake videos, the game, Part 1, is not that old, dude. It's not even 3 months old yet. Why people are so set on, news for Remake Part 2, and they keep forgetting that these are full-size games. This is not an episodic release. It's not like they can put out episode 1, so a couple months go by, they can put out episode 2. That's just not how... These are full-size games. They're still making Remake Part 2. The odds of us getting news for it anytime soon are pretty goddamn low. Maybe something by the end of the year, they could at least do a cinematic trailer potentially, but the game's probably not going to be here till late 2021 or sometime 2022 at the earliest. Anyways, moving past that and kind of keeping in line with the Remake Part 2, kind of news updates, whatever, we had Naoki Yamaguchi do an interview with, surprisingly, UnrealEngine.com or some shit. It was kind of weird. It's a very technical interview. They talk a lot about, the using Unreal Engine to make Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1. It's a surprisingly lengthy interview, but there's not really a whole lot of takeaways unless you're really into the technical aspects of making a video game. To talk about ambient occlusion, all kinds of other random stuff. It's not really important for us. But the main thing I want to talk about is the last little bit. At the very end, they say, "Thanks for your time. Where can people learn more about Final Fantasy VII Remake?" And Hamaguchi replies with, "As you may know, development is underway on the next game in the project, although we're not able to say anything more about that at this stage. For the latest information, you can follow us on Twitter or visit our official website." Nothing super major there. Just want to point out that, they're still working on the game. It's going to be a little bit before we get any news at all for it. Something I did find interesting, though, about this question, this answer, is that they ask, hey, where can people find more information about Final Fantasy VII Remake? And his reply is entirely based on Remake Part 2. And why I say that's interesting is it makes me think there's not going to be anything more for Remake Part 1, in terms of DLCs or expansions or something, which is something we've been talking about for a while now. Because the interviewer didn't ask a single question about, the sequel or Remake Part 2, but that's what Hamaguchi answered with, which makes me think that their development is entirely focused on making Part 2, which isn't a bad thing, but a lot of us were hoping for some sort of small, maybe DLC or expansion to kind of hold us over while we're waiting. It could still happen, but it just kind of seems like they're focused on the second game now. Anyways, moving on to what is probably the main part of this video. So a couple weeks back, we did a Remake Part 2 update video, and we talked about the Tifa and Cloud motion capture actors working together, which led a lot of us to believe they were doing work for Remake Part 2. Fast forward a little bit, and she uploaded another picture of them working together. This is actually a little bit older. This was uploaded on June 22nd, but people are kind of talking about it here recently. So it's cool to see that they are working together again. Hopefully it is on Remake Part 2, but the main takeaway from this is actually the picture itself, assuming this is about Remake Part 2. And why this is interesting is because in the background you have the Cloud motion capture guy sitting in what appears to be sort of like a beach lounge chair, and he has an umbrella. And the first thing that comes to mind when you think of that with Final Fantasy VII is, of course, Costa del Sol. Which I think makes a lot of sense. It's a good catch by the community. What it really comes down to is whether or not these two do motion capture together for any other games or projects, or do they only work together exclusively for the remake project. If there's a way to know that, if there's a way to find out the information, then we can have a definitive answer one way or the other. If they work on other games together, then it could be for potentially a different game. If they only work together on the remake project, then we kind of have a definitive answer that Costa del Sol should be in Remake Part 2. Now, as for whether or not Remake Part 2 would go all the way up to Costa del Sol, it's hard to know because we just don't know what they're going to do, right? It's honestly hard to speculate what they're going to do with the next installment in the remake project because Part 1 is technically set in one location. Yes, Midgar has several different sectors, but it's still technically one location on the map of Gaia. But let's assume that Costa del Sol will be in Remake Part 2, then between Costa del Sol and Midgar, you have Calm, you have the Chocobo Ranch, you have the Mithril Mines, you have Fort Condor, and then you have Junon itself, and all that area in between. You then also have to factor in the new content, like new side quests, new characters, probably new locations as well, like smaller towns or villages, maybe like caves and things to explore, whatever the case. They're going to add new stuff to the world, of course. And then on top of all that, if we're comparing it to the original game, Costa del Sol is not a good stopping off point, which means we probably go out past that to Mount Corel, Corel itself, and then right after Corel is, of course, Gold Saucer. When it comes to Remake Part 2, if we're looking at the original game, out past Junon, I'm not exactly sure where a decent stopping off point would be. I know a lot of people want the second game to end on a certain character's death, but to be honest, I think that's asking too much. I don't think we're going to go that far into the story. I would definitely love if the game could go that far. I'd like to have as much content as possible in the second game without sacrificing quality, but that's pretty far into the story, man. That's all the way up to where the first disc actually ends for the original FF7, so I don't see them putting that much content in the second game, but I guess we could be hopeful. But when it comes to this image and the possibility of it being mocap for Costa del Sol, it is possible, but that doesn't necessarily mean we actually get to Costa del Sol in our game, right? It could just be for a cutscene. For all we know, the game goes up to the point of Junon, like we talked about 1,000 times on the channel, and this mocap could just be for like a cutaway cutscene of like Hojo chilling on the beach, like a kind of a funny, quirky, weird FF7 cutscene of Hojo enjoying the sun. So even if this would be motion capture for Costa del Sol, that doesn't necessarily mean we actually get gameplay in Costa del Sol or even get to go to that location in the game. But still, of course, it's very, very interesting to talk about and very interesting to speculate on. So I want to pass off to you guys. What do you think they are motion capturing here? And do you guys know if they even work together on other projects or not? And if this is mocap for Costa del Sol, do you think it's going to be just for a cutscene, or are we going to have actual gameplay and actually get to go to that location? Either way, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys aren't new and to more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on notifications. Follow me on Twitter at @dashingdavid. I'm my Discord. Links to my social networks are in the description and in the outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.